How do we worship God? How do you worship this great, big, invisible, perfect entity? How do we show love and appreciation for God? Do we need candles? Do we need to go get some herbs out of the garden and make an aromatic incense that can permeate the room? Will that make us more worshipful? Do I need to go stand on one leg in a stream and hum? No, it's a little more down to earth than that. Jesus stated for us, he said, you need to worship the Lord in spirit and in truth. There are some esoteric type of things about worship that only the Spirit understands. But then there's also some very practical things that happen around us that our body and our mind understands. And so Jesus said to truly worship God, you need to focus on both of these things. You need to worship in spirit and in truth. This goes all the way back into the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 12, verse 24 says, only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart. Earlier in the chapter, he says that as well. Samuel says, search for the Lord or serve the Lord with all of your heart. And this is what he's commissioning Israel, God's people, to do. Serve the Lord with your heart, but serve him in truth. And then again, we hear that echoed in Jesus' statement to us to worship in spirit and in truth. Now, what most people get wrong is most people tend to go and worship. And they just worship God in spirit. And they just get caught up in whatever spirit is present. If everybody is in sync on this one particular song, then most will just join in with them and worship right alongside with him. And they join in the spirit of the room. And maybe it's a somber song, and they join in that spirit. Maybe it's a delightful song and perky, and they join in that spirit. And maybe they worship with this group of people this week and join their spirit, and they worship with that group of people next week and join their spirit. And they just worship in spirit, worship in spirit, worship in spirit. But has there ever come a time where the truth matters? Jesus said to worship God in spirit and in truth. Here is the main reason you need to worship God in truth as well. Because if you begin to only worship God in spirit, I guarantee you that what you're going to begin to do is you're going to begin to worship God in your personal preferences. You see, you're only going to be able to find the spirit of worship inside of the things that you like or admire or focus upon. You see, we give ourselves preference and deference first. And you know what the first things I give in my life preference to? The things that I like the most. And so what happens is we begin to go, and yes, we begin to worship, but we only worship in the ways that we like. And so then Satan goes, I wonder how I can lead these people astray. I will give them things that they like, and they're just so quickly involved in worship that we'll just kind of veer away from truth. We'll slowly leave the truth behind. You see, your likes, your preferences, those things make you vulnerable because you absolutely are biased at that direction. You say, these are my preferences. These are the things I like. This is the boat I will jump into quickly. But Jesus was very clear. You need to worship God in spirit and in truth. Yes, worship God, but worship him truly. You see, a lot of people will jump on board and will begin to worship God as they like to worship, and they will worship the things about God that they like up until they bump into certain elements of the truth that they've never plundered, they've never dug into, they've never taken time to discover. And then it's at that point they go, no, I don't like that part of God. I don't like that part of what this church or this group of people presents God as. So I'm just going to kind of leave that part back. I'm just going to worship in spirit only. And pretty soon, if we're only worshiping God, not in spirit and in truth, but in spirit and in preferences, in spirit and in the things that I favor, then pretty soon I'm only worshiping my version of who I think God is, and that's not really worship at all. So take care. Worship and serve God in spirit and in truth.